It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. My own son, flesh of my flesh, spat directly in my face. A glob of saliva sliding down my weathered cheek, while his wife and mother-in-law sat there smiling, like they'd just witnessed something worthy of applause. And applaud they did, 3 pairs of hands clapping while I stood there, humiliation soaking into my bones like rainwater. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. They say you never forget the moment your heart breaks beyond repair. For some folks, it's losing a spouse after 50 years. For others, it's watching their home burn to the ground. For me, it was standing in my son Michael's dining room, feeling his spit drip down my face while the women in his life celebrated my degradation. I'm Walter Simmons. Most people call me Walt. 73 years old last March, though most days my joints remind me I'm closer to 100. Retired construction foreman with 42 years on the job. Widower going on 8 years now since my Louise passed from pancreatic cancer. Father to 1 son, grandfather to 2 kids I barely know anymore. My days follow the same rhythm, like an old clock that refuses to quit ticking. Up at 5:30 a.m. out of habit, even though there's no job site waiting. Coffee on the back porch, while the sun climbs over the pine trees behind my little house in western Pennsylvania. A house that's paid for, thank you very much. Paid every mortgage payment myself, never missed one, even during the layoffs in the 80s. Breakfast is always the same, 2 eggs over easy. Wheat toast, no butter, doctor's orders after my cholesterol scare 3 years back. The local paper, not on one of those tablet things, but the actual paper. Crossword puzzle with my second cup of coffee. Shower, dress, and then the long empty hours that retirement brings when you're alone. Some days I volunteer at the Veterans Center, helping guys even older than me fill out paperwork for benefits they earned decades ago. Other days I putter around the workshop I built in the garage, making birdhouses or small furniture pieces nobody needs, but that keep my hands busy. Weekends I used to spend with Michael and his family, but that was before things went south. I wasn't always alone. Louise and I had 41 years together before cancer took her. We met at a church picnic in 1968, just after I got back from Vietnam. She had these bright blue eyes and a laugh you could hear from across a football field. Smart as a whip too, worked as a school secretary while putting herself through night classes to become a teacher. By the time she retired, she was running the entire English department at the high school. We tried for years to have children. 4 miscarriages nearly broke us. But then Michael came along in 1980, our miracle baby when Louise was 35, and I was already pushing 40. Maybe that's why we spoiled him. When you wait that long for something, you tend to cherish it beyond reason. I can still see him taking his first steps across our living room floor, arms outstretched, face determined. I remember teaching him to throw a baseball in the backyard, his little fingers struggling to grip the seams right, coaching his little league team, staying up all night building his science fair projects, driving him to college with the truck packed so full we could barely see out the back window. The sacrifices came naturally. That's what parents do. Second job when the braces needed paying for. Smaller vacations so we could save for his college fund. Skipping a new truck so he could have a car for his 16th birthday. You don't think of them as sacrifices at the time. They're just the silent agreements you make with yourself about what matters most. Michael was smart, got that from his mother, but he never had to fight for anything. Maybe that was our mistake. The world came easy to him, and he grew to expect it. Full scholarship to Penn State. Met his wife Rebecca there, pretty girl, from a wealthy family in Philadelphia. Her father owns 6 car dealerships up and down the East Coast. The kind of money that makes my lifetime of savings look like pocket change. After graduation, Michael went to work for his father-in-law. No surprise there. Rebecca's family had connections we couldn't offer. Within 5 years, he was a regional manager with an office overlooking the Squealkill River and a house in one of those gated communities where they measure how tall your grass can grow. The distance happened gradually. First it was missed Sunday dinners because they were too busy. Then the holidays became complicated because Rebecca's family had traditions that couldn't be broken. Louise noticed it before I did. "They're embarrassed by us," she said one Christmas, when they stayed only 2 hours before heading to Rebecca's parents' mansion for the real celebration. I didn't want to believe it. My son wouldn't be ashamed of the people who sacrificed everything for him. But the signs were there. The way he'd wince when I'd use the wrong fork at their fancy dinner parties. How he'd correct my grammar in front of his in-laws. The growing impatience when I'd tell stories about the construction sites or my time in Vietnam. When Louise got sick, things got better briefly. Michael visited more often. I think death has a way of reminding people what matters. But after she was gone, the distance returned, wider than before. I became an obligation, a box to check on their busy calendar. "Dad, we really should have you over sometime." Sometime, always floating in a vague future that rarely materialized. I tried to bridge the gap. Bought nice clothes for when I'd visit them. Read books on the subjects Michael was interested in so we'd have something to talk about. Learned how to use one of those smartphones so I could get the pictures they'd send of the grandkids. Sent birthday cards with checks that got bigger each year, trying to buy a place in their lives. Pathetic, looking back on it. Rebecca's mother, Eleanor, never made any secret of her disdain. She's one of those women who married into money and spends her life making sure everyone knows it. Perfect hair, perfect nails, perfect smile that never reaches her eyes. She calls me Walter in this tone that somehow makes my own name sound like an insult. "Walter, do you really think that tie goes with that shirt?" "Walter, people in our circle prefer wine with dinner, not beer." "Walter, perhaps you could keep your Vietnam stories to yourself." They're rather depressing. I took it all. Swallowed my pride so many times I forgot the taste of it. Louise would have stood up to them. She never took crap from anybody. But without her, I just wanted to hold on to whatever scraps of family I had left. The invitation came 3 weeks ago. A text message from Michael. "Dad, we'd like you to come for dinner next Tuesday. Mom and Dad Thompson will be there. We have some news to share. I spent days preparing. Got a haircut. Bought a new shirt and tie from Macy's. Paid full price instead of waiting for a sale. Even practiced some conversation topics in front of the mirror so I wouldn't embarrass him. Pathetic old fool. Rehearsing small talk like it was a job interview. When I arrived, the house was spotless as always. One of those homes that looks like a magazine spread where you're afraid to sit on the furniture. Michael greeted me at the door with a quick hug that felt more like a formality than affection. Rebecca gave me her usual cheek-turn air kiss. Eleanor and Richard, her husband, were already seated in the living room, cocktails in hand. "Walter," Eleanor nodded without getting up. "You're looking healthy." The pause before healthy made it clear she meant the opposite. Richard at least stood to shake my hand. He's not as bad as Eleanor, just oblivious to anything outside his bubble of privilege. "Walt, how's retirement treating you? Getting in plenty of golf?" He knows damn well I've never golfed a day in my life. Dinner was some fancy salmon dish that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a week. The conversation flowed around me but rarely included me. Business talk, country club gossip, names of people I'd never met and places I'd never been. I nodded and smiled, determined not to be the reason the evening went sideways. After dessert, Michael clinked his glass with a spoon. Rebecca beamed beside him, her hand resting on his arm. "We have some exciting news," he announced. "I've been offered a position as Vice President of Operations for the entire Northeast region." Congratulations erupted around the table. Eleanor clapped her hands in delight. "Oh, I knew Richard was going to promote you." "Didn't I say so, Richard?" Richard puffed up with pride. "The boy's earned it. Hardest worker in the company." "That's wonderful news, son," I said, genuinely happy for him. "You've worked hard for this." Michael smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "There's more. The position is based in Boston. We'll be moving next month. The company is helping us purchase a home in Brookline. It's a beautiful neighborhood, excellent schools for the kids." My heart sank. Boston was a 6-hour drive from my house. Might as well be on the moon for a man my age who doesn't like highway driving anymore. Boston, I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. That's quite a change. It's an incredible opportunity, Dad, Michael continued. The compensation package is substantial. We'll be able to put the kids in private school. And the house, wait until you see the pictures. 5 bedrooms, a pool, home theater room. When did you decide all this? I asked, realizing as I spoke that the decision had clearly been made weeks, maybe months ago. We've been considering it since February, Rebecca interjected. Michael didn't want to say anything until it was final. February. 3 months they'd been planning this life-altering move without a single word to me. I see, I said, the words coming out more clipped than I intended. And when were you planning? To tell me, the day the moving trucks arrived? The table went silent. Michael's expression hardened slightly. Dad, this isn't about you. This is about my career, my family's future. Your family, I repeated. And what am I exactly? Eleanor made a small tutting sound. Walter, surely you don't expect Michael to turn down a prestigious position just because you'll miss Sunday dinners. Besides, there are these marvelous inventions called airplanes that can transport you to Boston quite efficiently. I felt heat rising in my face. I'm aware of airplanes, Eleanor. I'm also aware that in the past year I've seen my grandchildren exactly 4 times, despite living less than an hour away. I'm trying to understand how moving 6 hours away is going to improve that situation. Dad, Michael's voice had that warning tone, the one that said I was embarrassing him. This isn't the time. When is the time, Michael? When you're packed and gone? When the grandkids barely remember my name? When does your old man rate? A conversation about major life decisions that affect our family. Rebecca's voice was ice. Our family is making this decision together. The 4 of us, the 4 of them. Michael, Rebecca, and their 2 children. Not me, never me. I understand, I said, though I didn't. Not really. Congratulations on the promotion. I hope Boston makes you happy. I should have left then, should have thanked them for dinner, wished them well, and walked out with whatever dignity I had left. But 67 years of burying my feelings, of keeping the peace, of being the bigger person, it all boiled over in that moment. You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about family, about what we owe each other. My voice was surprisingly steady. When your mother got sick, she made me promise to look after you, to make sure you were happy. I've spent 8 years trying to keep that promise, even when it meant swallowing my pride, even when it meant pretending I didn't notice how ashamed you are of me. Dad, that's not, Michael started, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. I need to say this. I took a breath. I gave up promotion so we could stay in one place while you were growing up. Your mother and I skipped vacations to pay for your college applications. We remortgaged the house to help with your wedding, not because we had to, but because that's what family does. You support each other, you show up, you make room at the table. Eleanor made a dismissive sound. Walter, this emotional display is hardly appropriate. With all due respect, Eleanor, I'm not talking to you. I turned back to my son. Michael, I've tried to understand the distance. I've made excuses for the missed birthdays, the short visits, the way you check your watch every 20 minutes when I'm at your house. I told myself you were busy building your career, raising your kids, but I'm starting to think the truth is simpler. You just don't want me in your life. The table went silent. Michael's face flushed red. That's not fair. You're twisting this around to make yourself the victim. Am I? When was the last time you called just to check on me? When was the last time you asked about my life? Do you even know I had surgery last month? His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't known. Of course he hadn't. I hadn't told him because I didn't want to be a burden. Another mistake in a long line of them. Look, Michael said, his voice controlled but tight. I'm sorry if you feel neglected, but I have my own family to consider now. My own life. I can't organize everything around your feelings. I've never asked you to, I said quietly. I've only asked to be part of your life in some meaningful way, to know my grandchildren, to not be treated like an obligation." Rebecca intervened, her voice cold. "Michael works 60 hours a week to provide for us. He doesn't have time to make daily phone calls to check on your feelings." "Rebecca," Michael cautioned, but the damage was done. "No, I'm tired of this guilt trip every time we see him," she continued. "We invite him for dinner, and he turns it into a pity party. This is supposed to be a celebration of your promotion, not another episode of Poor Walter is Lonely." Eleanor nodded in agreement. "Honestly, Michael, I warned you about this when you invited him. Some people simply cannot be happy for others' success." Something inside me broke, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snapping of whatever last thread had been holding my heart together. I stood up slowly. "I think I should go." "Sit down, Dad," Michael said, more command than request. "You're overreacting as usual." "As usual," I repeated. "When have I ever made a scene at one of your dinners before?" "Every time you visit, there's some drama. Some complaint about how we don't see you enough, or call enough, or care enough. I'm tired of walking on eggshells around your fragile feelings." I barely recognized my son in that moment, this cold, dismissive man wearing expensive clothes and speaking with contempt about the father who had once carried him on his shoulders. "I'm sorry my loneliness has been such a burden to you," I said quietly. "I won't trouble you with it anymore." I turned to leave, but Michael stood up, blocking my path. "That's it? You ruin our celebration dinner and then just walk away?" Classic. Dad, always making everything about yourself and then playing the martyr. "Let me pass, Michael." "No, for once you're going to listen. We're moving to Boston. The kids will be in better schools. Rebecca will have better social connections. I'll have a career opportunity that most people would kill for. If you were any kind of father, you'd be happy for me instead of making me feel guilty." "I'm happy for you," I said, and meant it. "I'm just sad for us, for what we've lost. We haven't lost anything except your approval, which apparently comes with conditions I can't meet. The only condition is mutual respect, son." Something in Michael snapped then. His face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. "Respect? You want respect for what exactly? For doing the bare minimum a parent is supposed to do? For holding it over my head for 30 years? What have you ever done that deserves my respect?" Before I could answer, he stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "You know what I see when I look at you? A bitter old man who can't accept that the world has moved on without him, a relic, an embarrassment, someone I have to explain away to my friends and colleagues, and then it happened." As his tirade reached its peak, Michael's face twisted with disgust and he spat directly into my face, a deliberate, contemptuous act that splashed across my cheek and dripped down onto my new shirt. The room went silent for one heartbeat, then two. Then Rebecca started clapping. Slow at first, then with enthusiasm. Eleanor joined in, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Bravo, Michael," Eleanor said, as if he'd just performed a particularly difficult piano piece. "It's about time someone put him in his place." Rebecca stood up and moved beside her husband, placing her hand on his arm proudly. "You should have done that years ago." I stood perfectly still, feeling the warm saliva sliding down my face. 60 years of working with my hands, of building things that would last, of raising a son I thought would carry whatever was good in me forward. All of it reduced to this moment of absolute humiliation. I could have shouted, could have struck back with words that would cut just as deeply, could have reminded him of every sacrifice, every late night, every worry, every prayer that had gone into raising him. Instead, I simply took out my handkerchief, one of Louise's last gifts to me, with my initials embroidered in the corner, and wiped my face. Without a word, I walked past my son, past his wife and her mother, through the immaculate house with its expensive furniture and family photos, where I appeared in none, and out the front door into the cool evening air. I didn't look back, didn't slam the door. Just walked to my 10-year-old Ford pickup truck, the one Michael always suggested I replace with something more appropriate, and drove away from the last remnants of the family I thought I had. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of them through the dining room window, still standing where I'd left them, still together, a unit that had no place for a worn-out old construction worker with rough hands and a broken heart. The strange thing was, I felt lighter with each mile that passed between us, as if I'd been carrying the weight of their judgment for so long that its sudden absence made me float. The truth can be painful, but it can also set you free. And the truth was that my son had made his choice long ago. I just hadn't been willing to see it. That night, sitting alone in my quiet house with its faded furniture and walls covered in photos from a happier time, I made a decision of my own. I would no longer chase a relationship that existed only in my memory, would no longer make myself small to fit into the corners of my son's life, where he occasionally permitted me to exist. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my brother Frank in Arizona. We drifted apart after Louise died, my fault more than his. Pride and grief are a dangerous combination. But Frank answered on the second ring, and the warmth in his voice when he realized it was me made something inside my chest unclench for the first time in years. "Walt, Jesus, is that really you?" "It's me, Frankie, been too long. Damn straight it has." "You okay? Something happened?" I almost lied out of habit. Almost said everything was fine. But I was done with pretending. "No, I'm not okay. But I think I might be, if you're still willing to have your stubborn older brother come visit for a while." Frank's laugh was exactly as I remembered it. "Get your ass on a plane, Walt. The guest room's been waiting for you for 8 years. That night I booked a one-way ticket to Phoenix, arranged for my neighbor to watch the house, packed only what I needed, leaving behind the costumes I'd worn, trying to fit into Michael's world. As the date of my departure approached, I waited for a call or text from my son, some acknowledgement of what had happened, some attempt at apology or explanation. The phone remained silent. I wasn't surprised, just sad that my expectations had finally aligned with reality. The morning I left for the airport, I wrote a letter and left it on the kitchen table. Not for Michael, I had said all I needed to say to him. This letter was for Louise, telling her that I was finally letting go of the promise to look after our son. He was a grown man who had made his choices, and now I was making mine. Frank was waiting at baggage claim, grey-haired and tan, wearing a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt and the biggest smile I'd seen in years. He hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. "Took you long enough," he said, taking my suitcase. "But better late than never." As we walked out into the Arizona sunshine, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Not the ache of loss that had been my constant companion for 8 years. Not the desperate hope that tomorrow would be the day my son remembered who I was to him. It was possibility, the chance to build something new from the wreckage of what was lost. A future that didn't depend on being wanted by people who had made it clear I wasn't. Frank's house was on the edge of a retirement community full of people starting over for various reasons. Widowers and divorcees, estranged parents and forgotten grandparents. People who had faced the hard truth that sometimes the family you're born with or create isn't the family that sustains you in the end. "Guest room's all yours for as long as you want," Frank said, showing me around. "But fair warning, once the ladies in the community center find out there's a new single man, you're gonna need a stick to beat 'em off." I laughed for what felt like the first time in years. I'm a 73-year-old former construction worker with bad knees and worse hearing. "I think the ladies will survive," Frank shook his head. "You never did know your own worth, Walt. Maybe it's time you figured it out." That night, sitting on Frank's patio, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and purple I'd never seen before, I realized something important. The worst had already happened. My son had rejected me in the most humiliating way possible. I'd walked away from the last pretense of family. And yet here I was, still breathing, still capable of feeling the warmth of the sun and the comfort of a brother's welcome. I had survived. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation someday or permanent, estrangement would happen on terms that included my dignity. I would no longer make myself small enough to be tolerated in the corners of my son's life. I would no longer pretend that crumbs from his table were enough to nourish me. Sometimes walking away isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the first step toward becoming whole again. Frank wasn't much for deep conversations. Never had been, but he knew how to be there without making a fuss about it. That first week in Arizona, we settled into an easy rhythm. Coffee on the patio at sunrise, a trip to the local diner for breakfast. Afternoons spent with Frank showing me around his community, introducing me to neighbors who smiled and asked normal questions, not looking at me like I was some relic they had to tolerate. "You sleep okay?" And Frank would ask each morning, and I'd nod whether I had or not. The truth was, I hadn't slept through the night since I left Pennsylvania. My dreams were full of Michael's face, not as the man who had spat on me, but as the little boy who used to climb into my lap with picture books, begging me to read "Just one more, Daddy." At night, lying in Frank's guest room with its desert-themed quilts and photos of places I'd never been, I'd replay conversations from the past few years, small moments that hadn't seemed important at the time, but now glowed with new meaning. Michael at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, checking his watch repeatedly, then announcing they needed to leave early to attend the real Thanksgiving at Eleanor's house. The casual way he'd said it, like I wasn't even supposed to notice the insult. Rebecca rolling her eyes at Louise's funeral when I broke down during my eulogy. Always making it about himself, she'd whispered to Eleanor, not quite quietly enough. The time my grandson Tyler, just 7 years old then, had asked me to come to his school play. "Grandpa, you'll come, right? You promised." And Michael stepping in, "Dad's very busy, Tyler. Besides, Grandma Eleanor has better seats reserved for us. You wouldn't want Grandpa sitting all by himself, would you?" Memories that felt different now, not just painful but suspicious. Like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was supposed to be solving. A week into my stay, Frank and I were having lunch at the community center when a woman about my age stopped by our table. She had silver hair cut in a practical bob and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "You must be Walt," she said, extending her hand. "I've heard about you. I'm Diane Roberts, head of the community council here. Don't believe anything this troublemaker told you," I said, gesturing at Frank. She laughed. "Actually, I heard you were a construction foreman for over 40 years. We're looking for someone to advise on our community center expansion project. Volunteer position, but it comes with free lunches." Before I could answer, Frank jumped in. "He'll do it. Gets him out of my hair during the day, and just like that I had somewhere to be. Something to contribute. People who actually wanted what I knew. The project was simple enough, a 2,000 square foot addition to the community center with new activity rooms and storage. The kind of job I could have managed in my sleep during my working years. But the retired accountants and school teachers on the building committee treated my input like gold. "Walt, what do you think about this flooring?" "Walt, the contractor says we need to upgrade the HVAC system. Is he right, or just padding the bill?" "Walt, can you come to the meeting with the architect? We need someone who speaks their language." I started sleeping better, started feeling useful again, started thinking less about what I'd lost, and more about what might still be ahead. Then the phone call came. I was reviewing blueprints with Diane one afternoon when my cell phone rang. An unknown Pennsylvania number. My heart jumped to my throat. "Excuse me," I said to Diane. "I should take this." I stepped outside into the dry desert heat. "Hello, Walt. It's Rosa. Rosa Martinez from next door." Rosa had been my neighbor for 15 years. Widowed about the same time as me, she'd often bring over tamales or her famous chicken soup when she thought I wasn't eating right. "Rosa, everything okay?" Her voice was hesitant. "I'm not sure, Walt. There are people at your house. They're removing things, furniture, boxes. I asked who they were, and they said they were helping Michael clean out the house. My blood went cold. Did they have a key? Yes, they let themselves in. I wouldn't have called, but something doesn't feel right. They're taking everything, Walt, even the pictures on the walls. When did this start? Yesterday afternoon. They have a big moving truck. I asked if you were selling the house, and the man just said, "Ask Michael." I thanked Rosa and promised to call her back. My hands were shaking as I ended the call. Diane noticed immediately when I returned. "Walt, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet." "Family emergency," I managed. "I need to talk to my brother." I found Frank in the woodworking shop, happily turning a bowl on a lathe. His face fell when he saw me. "What happened?" "Michael is emptying my house. Rosa says there's a moving truck. They're taking everything." Frank's expression hardened. "Did you give him permission?" "Of course not. I haven't spoken to him since I left. The house is still mine. I'm still paying the mortgage, the utilities, everything." "Then he's stealing from you," Frank said simply. "We need to call the police." "I can't call the police on my own son." "Why the hell not? If it was a stranger breaking in and taking your stuff, you wouldn't hesitate." He was right, but the thought of having Michael arrested made me physically ill. "I need to call him first. Maybe there's some explanation." Frank's snort made his opinion of that idea clear, but he handed me his phone. My own suddenly seemed inadequate, like it might shatter from the weight of the call I needed to make. Michael answered on the fourth ring. "Hello." His voice wary, unfamiliar. "It's Dad." A pause. "Where are you?" Not "how are you?" Or "I've been worried." Just "where are you?" Like I was a missing shipment he was tracking. "I'm in Arizona with Uncle Frank. Rosa Martinez called me. She says you're removing things from my house." Another pause. "We're just getting some of our stuff. Things the kids left there. Family photos." "Family photos of who?" "My pictures of your mother? Of you growing up? Those aren't your stuff, Michael. Dad, you disappeared without a word. What were we supposed to think?" The audacity took my breath away. "Without a word?" You spat in my face. Your wife and mother-in-law applauded. What exactly was I supposed to say after that? "You're exaggerating." "I didn't." Don't you dare tell me what did or didn't happen. I was there, Michael. I felt your spit on my face. I saw the satisfied look in Rebecca's eyes. His voice turned cold. "Fine, have it your way. But you can't just abandon your life and expect everything to stay frozen in place. We need to discuss what happens with the house, your finances, everything. I didn't abandon anything. I'm taking a break with my brother. The house is still mine. My finances are certainly none of your business. Actually, they are. We've spoken with a lawyer. Your behavior has been erratic. Disappearing without notice, refusing contact. We're concerned about your mental capacity." The blood drained from my face. Frank must have seen something in my expression because he stepped closer, putting his hand on my shoulder. "My mental capacity," I repeated, the words tasting like metal in my mouth. "Dad, we're worried about you. Rebecca's cousin is a geriatric specialist. He says these sudden personality changes could indicate dementia or other cognitive issues." I almost laughed. "My personality didn't change, Michael. I just finally stopped accepting your disrespect. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This paranoid, combative attitude isn't like you. Put simply, we're exploring guardianship options," he continued, his voice taking on that professional tone he used when talking to subordinates. "For your own protection." The room seemed to tilt. Guardianship. They were trying to take legal control of my life, my decisions, my money. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here," I managed, my voice distant to my own ears. "And I'm perfectly competent. Any judge will see that. A judge will see an elderly man who walked away from his home without notice after creating a scene at a family dinner. They'll see a pattern of increasing isolation and paranoia. They'll see a concerned son trying to protect his father's interests. He'd clearly rehearsed this, probably with Eleanor's help. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, genuinely bewildered. "What do you want from me?" "We want to help you, Dad. This isn't like you. The father I know wouldn't just walk away from his family, his home, everything he's built. The son I thought I knew wouldn't spit in his father's face." Silence stretched between us. Then in a voice so calculating it sent chills down my spine, Michael said, "Prove it." "What?" "Prove I spat on you. It's your word against mine, Rebecca's, and Eleanor's. 3 witnesses who'll testify you had an emotional outburst during dinner, made accusations about being excluded, and then stormed out dramatically. The room was definitely spinning now. You'd lie about that? All of you?" "I'm not lying, Dad. I'm concerned about your memory and perception of events. This delusion about me spitting on you, it's exactly why we're worried." I leaned against the wall for support, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. Frank took the phone from my hand. "Michael, this is your Uncle Frank. Listen to me very carefully. Your father is staying with me. He's completely lucid and competent. If you continue removing items from his house without permission, we will file a police report for theft and breaking and entering. If you try to pursue any guardianship nonsense, I will personally testify about your father's mental capacity, and I'll bring half this retirement community with me as witnesses. Are we clear?" I couldn't hear Michael's response, but Frank's face darkened. "Is that right? Well, here's something for you to consider, nephew. Your father may have been too decent to record your little family dinner, but I'm recording this phone call right now. Arizona's a one-party consent state. Every threat you've made, every lie you've told about what happened, I've got it all saved. So before you start filing legal paperwork, you might want to consider how that's going to play in court." Frank wasn't actually recording anything. I could see his phone screen from where I stood, but Michael didn't know that. After another moment, Frank ended the call. "Sit down before you fall down," he ordered, guiding me to a chair. "I'll get you some water." When he returned, I gulped it down, my hands still shaking. "They're going to try to have me declared incompetent," I said, the words sounding unreal. "My own son. They can try," Frank said grimly, "but we're not going to let them." That night, I had my first panic attack. Woke up gasping for air, convinced I was dying. Frank found me on the floor of the bathroom at 2 a.m., drove me to the emergency room with no questions asked. The doctor said my heart was fine, just anxiety and stress. Gave me a prescription I didn't want to fill. "This is what they want," I told Frank on the drive home, "to push me until I break. Then they can point and say, 'See, he's not well.'" Frank's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Then don't break. Easier said than done." For the next week, I jumped every time my phone rang. Couldn't focus on the community center plans. Couldn't sleep without seeing Michael's face, hearing him say, "Prove it," Diane noticed. Of course she did. She found me staring blankly at blueprint revisions one morning. "My mind 1,000 miles away in Pennsylvania. I don't mean to pry," she said gently, "but something's eating at you, Walt. And whatever it is, it's getting worse. Not better." I almost brushed her off with some vague reassurance. The habit of keeping family problems private ran deep. But something in her kind eyes broke through my defenses. "My son is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent," I said. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and raw. "He wants control of my house, my finances. He's telling people I had some kind of breakdown, that I imagined things that didn't happen." She didn't look shocked or embarrassed by my confession, just nodded thoughtfully. "And did these things happen?" "Yes, he spat in my face during a dinner at his house. His wife and mother-in-law applauded." "That's horrible," she said simply. "And now they're trying to gaslight you." "Gaslight? Make you question your own reality. It's a form of psychological abuse." I'd never thought of it in those terms, but the description fit perfectly. "He told me I'd need to prove it happened. Said it would be his word against mine." Diane's expression hardened. "My first husband tried something similar during our divorce. Claimed I was unstable, paranoid. Said things had never happened the way I remembered them." "What did you do?" "Fought back with evidence. Kept meticulous records. Found witnesses. Built a case stronger than his lies. I don't have evidence. It was just the 4 of us at that dinner." She considered this. "What about before? Was there a pattern of behavior leading up to this incident?" I thought about it. Years of small humiliations, comments, being excluded from family events, treated like an embarrassment. And did anyone else ever witness these things? Friends, neighbors, other family members? Louise would have been my witness, but she was gone. Then I remembered something. My neighbor Rosa. She was at Michael's high school graduation party. Eleanor made a comment about my clothes being charmingly blue-collar. Rosa heard it, confronted her about it later. Good. Who else? My brother-in-law, Jim, he and his wife were at Christmas dinner 2 years ago when Michael announced they were leaving early for the real Christmas celebration at Eleanor's house. Keep going. For the next hour, Diane helped me list every incident I could remember and who might have witnessed it. People who had seen the pattern of disrespect and exclusion over the years. Not proof of the spitting incident itself, but evidence that Michael and his wife had been gradually pushing me out of their lives, treating me with increasing contempt. "This is good," she said when we finished. "Not conclusive, but it establishes a pattern that supports your version of events. Makes their story about your sudden breakdown less credible. What do I do with this list? First, you call each of these people. See if they remember these incidents, if they'd be willing to provide a statement. Then you get a lawyer, Walt, a good one, specialized in elder law. I can't afford— Yes, you can, she interrupted. Your financial independence is exactly what they're after. Spending money to protect it isn't wasteful, it's necessary. She was right, of course. The next day, Frank drove me to meet with Patricia Menendez, an attorney specializing in elder law. Her office was small but immaculate, with credentials covering one wall and family photos on the other. "Your brother explained your situation on the phone," she said after introductions. "I'd like to hear it from you, in your own words." I told her everything. The years of gradual exclusion. The dinner where Michael announced the Boston move. The confrontation that ended with him spitting in my face. My decision to visit Frank. The call from Rosa about people removing items from my house. Michael's threats about seeking guardianship. She took notes throughout, her expression giving nothing away. When I finished, she looked up. "Mr. Simmons, based on what you've told me, your son has no legitimate grounds for guardianship. You're clearly lucid, making reasonable decisions and managing your affairs. However, that doesn't mean he won't try, and these cases can be messy, expensive, and emotionally draining. What do I suggest I do? First, we need to establish clear, documented evidence of your competence. I'm going to refer you to a geriatric specialist for a cognitive assessment. Not because I think you need one, but because we want our evidence in place before they try to get their own evaluation." I nodded. "What else?" "We need to secure your assets. If you haven't updated your will since your wife passed, now is the time. We should also discuss power of attorney, someone you trust to make decisions if you genuinely become incapacitated in the future." "My brother Frank," I said without hesitation. "Good. Next, we need to document the unauthorized removal of items from your home. I'll have a letter sent immediately demanding an inventory of everything taken and its immediate return." She continued outlining steps. "Freezing my credit to prevent unauthorized access. Setting up financial monitoring. Documenting all contact with Michael and his family. What about the house?" I asked. "Should I go back?" She considered this. "Not yet. If they're building a case about your mental state, returning home alone might play into their narrative. For now, stay with your brother. Continue your volunteer work. Establish roots in the community there. We'll document everything to show you're making reasonable, measured decisions, not acting erratically, as they claim." As we were wrapping up, Patricia asked one more question. "Mr. Simmons, what do you want the outcome to be here? Beyond protecting yourself legally, what resolution would you like to see with your son?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on defending myself, I hadn't thought about what came after. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to cut all ties, never see him again. But he's still my son. I still remember teaching him to ride a bike, helping with his homework, watching him graduate college." Patricia nodded. "That's completely understandable. Keep that perspective. This isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about protection and truth." 2 days later, I met with Dr. Levine, the geriatric specialist Patricia had recommended. He ran me through a series of cognitive tests, memory assessments, problem-solving exercises. At the end, he smiled reassuringly. Mr. Simmons, your cognitive function is excellent for a man of any age. Your short-term memory, reasoning skills, and mental flexibility are all well above average for your age group. Frankly, I wish all my patients were doing as well as you are. His official report, sent directly to Patricia, became the first piece of concrete evidence in our defense. Then came the blow I hadn't anticipated. I was having lunch with Frank and Diane when my phone rang. "Rosa again? Walt, I'm so sorry to bother you, but something's happening at your house. There's a real estate agent. They're putting up a for sale sign." The sandwich I'd been eating turned to ash in my mouth. "A what? A for sale sign?" I asked the agent who authorized this, and she said she's working with Michael Simmons, who has power of attorney for his father. Frank saw my expression and took the phone. After a brief conversation, he hung up and looked at me grimly. "They're selling your house, Walt. He can't do that. He doesn't have power of attorney." Apparently, he's claiming he does. Diane was already dialing. "Patricia, it's Diane Roberts. I'm with Walt Simmons, and we have an emergency situation." What followed was a blur of legal action. Patricia filed an emergency injunction to stop the sale. She discovered Michael had forged power of attorney documents, using an old signature of mine from a birthday card to create the forgery. The police were involved now, not just for the unauthorized entry and removal of property, but for document forgery, a felony. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unravel. Not mine, not my son's. Some television drama about people I didn't know. The night after the forgery was discovered, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Dad, it's Rebecca. We need to talk. Just you and me." I showed it to Frank, who immediately said, "Don't respond." It's a trap, but I couldn't help myself. This was my daughter-in-law, the mother of my grandchildren. "What about?" Her reply came quickly. "Michael doesn't know I'm contacting you. Things have gotten out of hand. Can I call you?" Against Frank's advice, I agreed. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Walt? It's Rebecca." Her voice sounded different, softer, without the edge of contempt I'd grown used to. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I want to apologize. What happened at dinner? It was wrong, all of it. The way Michael spoke to you, the way I reacted, my mother's behavior. We were cruel, and you didn't deserve it. The apology was so unexpected, I didn't know how to respond." "Walt, are you there?" "Yes," I managed. "I'm just surprised." "I know. You have every right to be suspicious. But things have changed since you left. Michael he's not doing well. The stress of the new job, the move, everything with you, it's affecting him. He's drinking more, having trouble at work." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Whatever had happened between us, I didn't want my son to suffer. "We need your help, Walt. The kids miss you. They keep asking when Grandpa's coming back. And the legal situation, it's gotten completely out of control. Michael never meant for it to go this far. He forged my signature, Rebecca. He tried to sell my house without permission. He took family heirlooms that belonged to Louise and me. I know, and it was wrong. He was desperate. The move to Boston is more expensive than we anticipated. The house there, the private schools, we're overextended. He thought if he could sell your house, use some of your savings, just temporarily, and there it was. The real reason for the call, not reconciliation, not genuine remorse, money. So this isn't about missing me or worrying about my well-being," I said, my voice hardening. "This is about accessing my assets. No, Walt, you're misunderstanding. I don't think I am. You just admitted Michael's plan was to sell my house and use my savings without my knowledge or consent. It sounds terrible when you put it that way. He just wanted to secure your legacy for his children, your grandchildren. Everything would eventually go to them anyway. The calculation of it all struck me like a physical blow. After I'm dead, Rebecca. Not while I'm still alive and using it to, live. You're twisting my words. I'm done with this conversation. Tell Michael the next communication I want from either of you should come through your attorney to my attorney." I hung up, my hands shaking with anger and a strange sense of clarity. The fog of confusion and hurt that had surrounded me since that dinner was finally lifting. They had never cared about me. Not as a father-in-law, a grandfather. I was a resource to them, a bank account, a house that could be sold, assets that could be liquidated. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, it was almost liberating. The question that had haunted me, why would my son treat me this way, finally had an answer that made sense. Not because I was embarrassing or insufficient or unworthy of love, but because I was useful only as long as I provided material support. I called Patricia immediately and told her about Rebecca's call. She wasn't surprised. Classic tactic, she said. When intimidation fails, try manipulation. When manipulation fails, try reconciliation with strings attached. I've seen this pattern before in family financial disputes. What happens now? I asked. Now we go on offense, Mr. Simmons. The forgery gives us significant leverage. Your son has committed a felony. We can use that to force a resolution that protects your interests. I don't want my son to go to jail, I said immediately. That's your choice. But we can still use the threat to secure a legally binding agreement that protects your assets and establishes clear boundaries. 2 days later, I received a call from Michael's attorney requesting a meeting. Patricia advised me to agree, but insisted on being present. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at her office. Michael arrived alone, without Rebecca or his attorney. He looked terrible, thinner than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes, his usual immaculate appearance rumpled and tired. Patricia was professional but firm. Mr. Simmons, I've advised my client not to speak directly with you given recent events. Any communication should go through me. Michael nodded, looking defeated. I understand. I just wanted to see my father face to face. He turned to me, his expression unreadable. Dad, I'm sorry. What I did was wrong, all of it. The way I treated you over the years. What happened at dinner. The house. The forgery. I got caught up in trying to maintain a lifestyle we couldn't afford. Trying to impress Rebecca's family, trying to be something I'm not. I said nothing, watching him carefully. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued. I don't deserve it, but I want you to know that the DA has agreed not to press charges if I make full restitution. Everything taken from the house is being returned. The real estate listing has been cancelled. The forged documents have been destroyed. Patricia watched him with professional skepticism. And what are you seeking from my client in return? Michael shook his head. Nothing. I just want him to know that I understand what I've done. The consequences are mine to bear. And Rebecca, Eleanor? I asked, breaking my silence. Michael's face tightened. Rebecca and I are separating. After everything came to light, after the legal consequences became clear, she wasn't interested in taking responsibility. She's moved back in with her parents. For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy. And the children? We'll share custody. But the Boston job is off the table. I've been placed on administrative leave pending an ethics review at work. Richard isn't pleased with the family's name being associated with fraud allegations. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Not the polished, condescending man who had spat in my face, but glimpses of the boy I'd raised. Scared, humbled, at a crossroads. What will you do? I asked. Start over. Find a job that doesn't depend on my father-in-law's connections. Live within my means for once. Try to be someone my children can respect, even if it's too late for their grandfather to respect me. Patricia glanced at me, silently asking if I wanted to continue this conversation. I nodded slightly. I don't hate you, Michael, I said quietly. I don't understand you. I don't recognize the man you've become. But I don't hate you, he nodded, eyes glistening. I don't recognize myself either. Not anymore. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of misunderstanding and hurt between us. I can't come back yet, I said finally. I need time, distance. I understand, but I'd like to speak to my grandchildren. See them occasionally when I'm ready. For the first time, a hint of a smile crossed his face. They'd like that. They ask about you all the time. As the meeting concluded, Michael hesitated at the door. Dad, I know it doesn't change anything, but I truly am sorry. Not just for the legal issues, but for that night. For what I did, for what I said. You didn't deserve any of it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As he walked out, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, just a profound sadness for what had been lost, and maybe the faintest glimmer of hope for what might someday be rebuilt from the ashes. Spring in Arizona passed in a blur of legal consultations, phone calls, and gradually rebuilding my sense of self. The community center project moved forward under my supervision, giving me purpose and connection when I needed it most. Diane became a trusted friend, frank and unwavering support. But beneath the new routines and relationships, questions lingered. How had things gone so wrong with Michael? What had transformed my son from the boy who once wrote "World's Best Dad" on Father's Day cards into a man who would spit in my face and try to steal my home? The easy answer, money, influence from Rebecca and Eleanor, felt incomplete. Have you looked through those old boxes you had shipped from Pennsylvania? Frank asked one evening as we sat on his patio watching the sunset. Might be some answers in there. He was right. I'd had Rosa ship several boxes of personal items to Arizona. Photo albums, letters, journals Louise had kept over the years. I'd avoided them, afraid of drowning in memories. But maybe it was time. That weekend I opened the first box. Photos spilled out. Michael's childhood in chronological order. His first steps, t-ball games, high school graduation, college move-in day. His wedding. I studied the wedding photos carefully. There was something in Michael's expression I hadn't noticed at the time. A tension around his eyes, a stiffness in his smile when Eleanor or Richard were nearby. In one candid shot, he was looking at Rebecca's father with what seemed like fear. The second box contained Louise's journals. She'd been methodical about keeping them, writing almost daily from the time we were married until a few weeks before her death. I'd never read them, respecting her privacy even after she was gone. But now, with the distance of time and circumstances, I felt she might forgive the intrusion. I started with the year Michael met Rebecca. At first, Louise's entries were enthusiastic. October 15th, 2002. Michael brought Rebecca home to meet us today. Such a lovely girl, so poised and well-spoken. Walt was charmed by her immediately, but as months passed, her tone shifted. February 8th, 2003. Another dinner cancelled. Michael says Rebecca's parents had theater tickets they couldn't use. I'm trying not to feel hurt that we've been pushed aside again. April 22nd, 2003. Something's changing in Michael. He seems anxious whenever we talk about his future plans. Rebecca's father has offered him a position at one of his dealerships. I worry he feels pressured to accept, though he's never shown interest in the car business. Then came an entry that made my heart stop. June 17th, 2003. Michael came alone today. Looked exhausted. When I asked if everything was okay, he broke down. Said Rebecca's parents have expectations that are overwhelming him. That Richard Thompson made it clear their continued relationship depends on Michael making something of himself in the family business. When I suggested he might consider whether this relationship was right for him, he looked almost frightened. Said, "Mom, you don't understand. The Thompsons aren't people you say no to. I'm worried there's more happening than he's telling us." I read through years of Louise's growing concern. Her observations of Michael becoming more distant, more anxious to please his in-laws. Her documentation of Eleanor's subtle put-downs and Richard's controlling behavior. Things I'd noticed but dismissed. Unwilling to create conflict. The final journal kept during her illness contained the most revealing entry. December 12th, 2016. Walt thinks I don't know he's been selling his tools to pay for the extra treatments. He's always protected me that way. I worry about him after I'm gone. Michael is so firmly under the Thompsons' influence now. I heard Eleanor tell him that Walt's blue-collar ways were holding Michael back professionally, as if hard work and integrity were shameful qualities. I tried to talk to Michael about how he lets them speak about his father, but he just says, "I don't understand how things work in their world." I'm afraid I understand all too well. Her final entry, written in a shaky hand just weeks before she died. January 30th, 2017. Made Walt promise to look after Michael, to make sure he's happy. But I should have made Michael promise to look after his father too. Walt will give until there's nothing left. That's who he is. I fear Michael has forgotten how to give at all. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. Louise had seen it all happening. The gradual reshaping of our son into someone who viewed his father's love as an exploitable resource rather than a gift to be treasured. She had worried not about me supporting Michael, but about Michael abandoning me. The next morning, I called Patricia. I've been reviewing old journals, letters, photos, I told her. I think I understand better what happened with Michael now. And what did you find? She asked. A pattern of influence. Pressure from his in-laws to distance himself from his embarrassing blue-collar father. Subtle at first, then more overt. Not that it excuses what he did, but understanding helps with closure, she finished for me. Have you decided what you want the final resolution to be? I'd been thinking about this for weeks. I want two things. First, legally binding protection for my assets. Second, the possibility, not the guarantee, but the possibility of rebuilding some kind of relationship with my grandchildren, and maybe someday with Michael. The asset protection is straightforward. We already have the injunction against selling your house. We can set up a revocable trust with specific provisions regarding Michael. As for the relationship aspect, that's more complicated. I understand. But I want to try. Patricia was silent for a moment. There's another option we haven't discussed. Family counseling with a professional mediator, not to excuse what happened, but to establish new boundaries and communication patterns. If Michael is willing, would you reach out to his attorney? See if he'd be open to it? She agreed, though I could hear the skepticism in her voice. To my surprise, Michael agreed immediately. His attorney contacted Patricia the same day, saying Michael was eager for any opportunity to make amends. 2 weeks later, we sat in the office of Dr. Gabriel Martinez, a family therapist specializing in elder relationships and financial conflicts. Michael arrived alone, still looking thinner than I remembered, but more put together than at our last meeting. Dr. Martinez established ground rules immediately. This isn't about assigning blame or revisiting every hurt. It's about understanding patterns and establishing healthier ones moving forward. Mr. Simmons, Walt, would you like to start by explaining what you hope to achieve? I took a deep breath. I want to understand how we got here. Not to blame you, Michael, but to make sure we don't repeat the same mistakes if we try to rebuild any kind of relationship. Michael nodded, his expression guarded but attentive. I've been reading your mother's journals, I continued. She saw things happening that I missed. The pressure you were under from the Thompsons. The way they gradually separated you from us. Something flickered in Michael's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Mom kept journals? Yes, very detailed ones. She was worried about you even before she got sick. Worried that you were being molded into someone you weren't meant to be. Michael looked down at his hands. She was right to worry. Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. Michael, can you help us understand how you experienced that pressure? For the next hour, Michael talked. Really talked, perhaps for the first time in years, about meeting Rebecca in college and being overwhelmed by her family's wealth and connections. About Richard Thompson taking him aside before the engagement and outlining exactly what would be expected of a man marrying into their family. He laid it out like a business arrangement. Michael said, his voice hollow. You'll work for me. You'll live where we approve. You'll associate with the right people. When I mentioned wanting to teach history, my actual degree, he laughed. Said that wasn't a Thompson-worthy ambition. And your mother and I, where did we fit in this arrangement? I asked. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. Richard made it clear that my humble beginnings were charming as an origin story, but shouldn't feature prominently in my new life. Eleanor was more direct. She said successful men distance themselves from limiting influences. And we were limiting influences, I said, the pieces falling into place. According to them, yes. Everything about you and Mom represented what I was supposed to be leaving behind. Your work ethic, your values, even your accent, all things that marked me as not belonging in their world, yet you chose their world. I said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. Michael nodded, misery etched in his face. I was a coward. I wanted the lifestyle, the prestige, and after a while I started believing them, started seeing you through their eyes instead of my own. Until that night at dinner, when I finally stood up for myself. Yes, his voice dropped to almost a whisper. Something snapped in me. All those years of trying to be the perfect Thompson's son-in-law, of being ashamed of my own father, it all came out in the worst possible way. Dr. Martinez guided the conversation toward concrete steps for the future. Michael had moved into an apartment after separating from Rebecca. He'd found a job teaching history at a community college, modest pay, but work he actually cared about. He was seeing the children 3 days a week. They ask about you, he told me. Tyler remembers fishing with you that summer before Mom died. Emma has that teddy bear you gave her that she still sleeps with every night. My heart ached at the mention of my grandchildren. I'd like to see them when everyone's ready. By the end of the session, we had a framework. Michael would continue therapy individually. We would meet with Dr. Martinez monthly. There would be supervised visits with the grandchildren, starting with video calls and progressing to in-person meetings. Most importantly, we established financial boundaries. I would maintain complete control of my assets. Any financial help for the grandchildren would go directly into education accounts only I could access. There would be no loans, gifts, or support for Michael directly. I don't want or expect your money, Dad, Michael said as we were leaving. I just want a chance to show you that I can be better than I've been. I nodded. Not ready to offer forgiveness, but willing to open the door to possibility. The legal proceedings concluded more smoothly than we'd anticipated. Michael signed agreements, acknowledging he had no claim to my house or assets. The forgery charges were dropped in exchange for full restitution and community service. Through spring and into summer, our tentative reconciliation continued. Weekly video calls with Tyler and Emma became the highlight of my days. They were understandably confused about why Grandpa was suddenly living in Arizona, but children are remarkably adaptable. Tyler showed me his science projects. Emma insisted on reading me bedtime stories instead of the other way around. In July, Frank suggested it was time to make a decision. You can't live in my guest room forever. Walt, much as I enjoy the company, he was right. I needed to decide whether to return to Pennsylvania or make Arizona my permanent home. The answer came from an unexpected source. During one of our therapy sessions, Dr. Martinez asked, Walt, what do you miss most about your old life? I thought about my house with its familiar creaks and corners, the workshop where I'd spent countless happy hours, the neighbors who'd become friends over decades, the community that knew Louise and me, that held our history. I miss my home, I said simply. Not just the house, but the place where I belong. Michael looked stricken. I took that from you. I'm so sorry. You tried, I corrected gently. But I'm still here, and that house is still mine. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane back to Pennsylvania, not running away this time, but deliberately choosing to reclaim my life. Frank drove me to the airport, gruffly reminding me that his guest room was always available if things go sideways again. Rosa was waiting at the airport, beaming as I emerged from the terminal. The house is all clean, she assured me. I've been checking on it weekly. There's fresh food in the refrigerator. Driving through my old neighborhood felt like slipping into a comfortable pair of shoes. Familiar, right? When Rosa pulled into my driveway, I was surprised to see several neighbors gathered on my front lawn. A hand-painted banner hung across the garage. Welcome home, Walt! Paul from across the street stepped forward to shake my hand. We heard what happened, he said. Wanted you to know we've got your back. Inside, the house was exactly as I'd left it, yet somehow different. Maybe I was the one who had changed. I moved through the rooms slowly, reacquainting myself with the space where Louise and I had built our life together. Everything Michael had removed, photos, keepsakes, tools, had been returned, though I noticed many items weren't in their original places. Small evidence of the violation that had occurred. That evening, sitting on my back porch watching fireflies blink in the gathering dusk, I called Michael. "I'm home," I told him. "I know." Rosa texted me. A pause. "How does it feel?" "Right. Different, but right." "Dad, He hesitated. "The kids were hoping maybe they could visit this weekend. If it's not too soon." It was soon. But looking around at my reclaimed space, I realized I was ready. "I'd like that. Tell them Grandpa's got fishing rods ready." That weekend became the first of many. Michael would drop the children off, sometimes staying for a meal, sometimes leaving to give us space. We established new patterns, new boundaries. He never asked for money, not once. Eleanor called exactly once, about 3 months after I returned. Her voice was cool, controlled, the same tone she'd always used with me. "Walter, I understand you're back in Pennsylvania." "Hello, Eleanor." "Yes, I am. Richard and I feel it would be better for everyone if certain unpleasantness from the past remained private. Family matters should stay within the family." I almost laughed at her audacity. "I couldn't agree more, Eleanor. That's why I've never spoken publicly about how you applauded when your son-in-law spat in my face." Her sharp intake of breath was satisfying. "That's not what happened. We both know exactly what happened. The difference is, I no longer care what you think about me or anything else." I ended the call feeling lighter, freer. Eleanor Thompson had no power over me anymore. Rebecca filed for divorce that fall. Michael didn't share many details, just that it was as amicable as could be expected. She moved to Boston anyway, taking the job Richard had arranged, stepping fully back into the world that had shaped her. The children split their time between them during school breaks, but lived primarily with Michael. A year after the incident that had shattered my world, I sat in my workshop putting the finishing touches on a dollhouse I'd built for Emma's birthday. My phone rang. "Michael." "Dad? Can I come over?" "There's something I need to ask you." He arrived 20 minutes later, nervously clutching a folder. "The community college has offered me a permanent teaching position," he said, after declining coffee. "Full benefits, tenure track. Not a lot of money, but steady. That's wonderful news. You seem to really love teaching." "I do." He fidgeted with the folder. "The thing is, I found a small house near the college. It needs work, a lot of work, but it's in my price range. The inspection report is intimidating." He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a home inspection with pages of issues flagged: electrical problems, plumbing concerns, structural questions. I thought maybe, if you had time, you might help me figure out which problems are serious and which are cosmetic. I don't know anything about construction or repairs. I paged through the report, noting items that were simple fixes versus major concerns. This isn't so bad. Old house problems mostly. Nothing that can't be fixed with time and know-how. Would you be willing to teach me?" Michael asked, his voice uncertain. "Not to do the work for me, but to show me how. The kids and I could work on it together, make it a project." The request caught me off guard. In all our years together, Michael had never shown interest in learning practical skills, had actively avoided them, in fact, seeing them as beneath his aspirations. "You want me to teach you home repairs?" He nodded, suddenly looking very young. "Mom always said you could fix anything. I thought it was just her being proud. But then I watched you build that treehouse for Tyler, and I realized I never learned any of those skills from you. Never wanted to. Something shifted in my chest, a letting go of old hurt, an opening to new possibility. "I'd like that," I said. "We can start this weekend." Through fall and winter, we spent Saturdays at Michael's fixer-upper. I taught him how to replace outlets, repair drywall, install ceiling fans. Tyler, 11 by then, became our eager apprentice, while Emma, 7, appointed herself project manager, complete with a clipboard and stern inspections. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, moments when old tensions surfaced. Michael still sometimes slipped into patterns of impatience or entitlement. I still sometimes expected disappointment. But we were trying, both of us, to build something new from the wreckage of what was lost. On a cold January evening, exactly 2 years after Louise died, I sat at my kitchen table, looking through old photos. Michael called just as I was putting them away. "Dad, Just checking if we're still on for tomorrow. Tyler's excited about learning to install the bathroom vanity. Wouldn't miss it. I'll bring my tools and some donuts. After we hung up, I walked through my quiet house to the back porch. The night was clear, stars sharp against the black sky. I imagined Louise somewhere among them, watching over us. "You were right to worry," I whispered to her memory. "But I think he's finding his way back. We both are. That's the thing about family. The real kind, not the perfect images we project to the world, but the messy, complicated connections that shape us. Sometimes they break apart under pressure. Sometimes the pieces can never be put back exactly as they were. But with enough patience, enough honest effort, something new can grow from the fractured places. I learned that respect isn't something you can demand or beg for. It's something you claim for yourself by setting boundaries, by refusing to accept less than you deserve. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's the first step towards something better. The spitting incident. It still happened. The humiliation and betrayal were real, but they don't define the end of my story. They're just the painful middle, the crucible that burned away illusion and left behind something stronger, clearer, more genuine. Some fathers never recover from such betrayal. Some sons never find their way back to authentic relationship. I count myself fortunate that we found a path, however imperfect, towards something true. Not what we had before, but something hard-earned and honest in its own way. If you've stayed with me through this story, I hope you found something useful in my experience. Maybe recognition of your own family struggles. Maybe courage to set boundaries you've been afraid to establish. Maybe just the comfort of knowing you're not alone in navigating the complex mathematics of family love and hurt. Please like this video if my story touched you in some way. Subscribe to this channel for more real-life experiences. And in the comments, I'd appreciate if you'd rate this story from 0 to 10, letting me know how it resonated with your own journey. Life doesn't give us perfect endings, just opportunities to choose dignity over pride, growth over resentment, and sometimes, when we're lucky, reconciliation over permanent loss.